This week on STC, we're eagerly anticipating the launch of iPhone 13 and iOS 15. The gloss is kind of off though, and a lot of people are asking questions about Apple's approach to privacy and some of the decisions it's taken. Does it mean now is not the right time to buy a new iPhone or upgrade to iOS 15? And if you're watching this video at home, you might want to just cast your eyes towards the router that you're using, because there's a real issue with one of the most popular routers on the market. So clearly we're all looking at the imminent launch of iPhone 13 and iOS 15, and there's a whole bunch of things going on right now, which makes this potentially the most complicated iPhone iOS launch I can remember, with CSAM and Touch ID and stuff. It's not clear sailing for Apple at all, is it?
And usually we're kind of gearing up for this time of year. It's September, it's the Apple iPhone launch, it's the launch of iOS, whichever number is coming up. As security and privacy focused people, it's becoming more and more interesting for us. There are becoming more privacy features in iOS 14 and now iOS 15. But now the whole thing's being clouded by this CSAM stuff, isn't it?
Completely right. And I think the takeaway from CSAM is too technical for most people to understand, including a lot of techies, let's be very clear, really badly communicated, and it's left this aftertaste. So it's not as headline news as it was. But clearly, the privacy lobby, the Snowdens of this world have a fantastic opportunity now to attack big tech in a way that most users don't really understand, and clearly lapping up what's being said.
Apple in iCloud has been doing this for a while anyway, has been scanning for child porn, as have Google, Microsoft, and everybody else. The difference here is the on-device scanning.
100%. It's really interesting. I mean, there's been Apple's kind of said that it does some iCloud mail screening. It hasn't screened photos in iCloud, and this is a really interesting debate for Apple, because it's not done the photos in iCloud because it feels that would be an invasion of privacy. So it's kind of whiteboard thinking was, we do it on the device, we don't breach that invasion of privacy. But obviously everyone's like, whoa, hang on, we're kind of cool with stuff in the cloud, but you're doing it on the device, and that's different. But look, I think take away. We'll talk about it. I don't. The options, if the alternative is Android, forget about it, right? Because your iPhone is significantly more private and secure than Google's device. So clearly stick with iPhone, but I do think there are some things you need to be aware about. And as we've said often on SDC, you need to look at your settings. I think actually for me, the two CSAM kind of child protection pieces of news that came out of Apple, both the iCloud Photos one and the iMessage one. The iMessage one is probably the more interesting one, because that's Apple innovating. There's no collated database of photos that it's checking for. That is pure on-device machine learning, trying to work out what kind of images are being sent. That has far more risk of scope creep than a very specific CSAM process. And I would welcome Apple taking a step back from that and saying, look, okay, beta, let's take a view, let's look at feedback. I think it doesn't want to jump into that particular icy pond feet first. It needs to think again.
You've been looking at iPhone 13 and iOS 15, haven't you, Kate? And one thing, we're talking about Apple innovation and privacy. One thing I was reading recently, and perhaps you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, which I often am. I've been reading that iOS 15 won't be having a private relay by default. Is that correct?
Not to start with, no. It's just going to be in beta. So you basically have to use that beta first. And I think from what I've seen, that's just because it's not ready yet. So it will come, but it's just not ready at launch. And this is the case with a lot of Apple features anyway. As we've seen before with iOS 14, we saw a lot of the features that we've been expecting, this kind of big bang launch to gradually filter throughout the year. We also know that Apple doesn't like to launch things unless they work properly. There have been a few mistakes, and with software, there's always going to be things that don't work as well. But that will be why it's actually happening. So no, we won't see private relay immediately, unfortunately. The other thing that's quite interesting to do with Apple is that we expected lots of Android users would be switching over to the iPhone 13. I mean, David, you've switched over, haven't you, as a long-time Android user? And a survey's come out by CellCell, who's someone who does surveys about, you know, who's going to buy which phones and why and that sort of thing. And the survey says that a very small proportion of Android users, actually less than last year, only 18%, are saying that they're going to switch to the iPhone 13. The things that have put them off, the main thing is actually the lack of Touch ID.
I think the survey says it comes in here because possibly a lot of Android users don't actually realise just how good Face ID is on the iPhone. And for most intents and purposes, it does make Touch ID redundant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's interesting. CSAM didn't really figure in that list, but I think, you know, you talked about private relay not only being in beta, and I think that's only, it's clearly not working. And I think that's such a great innovation and such a big plus. It's iCloud Plus and / iOS 15, such a big plus point. And I think, you know, interesting lesson is just, you know, with a lot of these features, just how they land and making sure they work and land properly. And, you know, it's only a minor one, but things like people understanding of VPNs and VPNs and private relay, and why now more than ever you don't want to have a dodgy VPN on your phone. Shouldn't anyway, but if you do, it will stop private relay work. So you almost get two negatives there. So something else that hopefully people will start to get used to over the next few weeks and months.
Something else that you don't want to be doing, according to the US government anyway, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CSA, is relying on passwords. They're not actually saying don't use passwords, they're saying don't use passwords on their own. And this is part of their bad practices list that they publish. And they've just added single-use authentication, which means passwords, essentially. What their advice is, what their warning is to businesses, is it's dangerous just to use passwords, and you should be looking at multi-factor authentication. What's also interesting is that this is only the third item on their bad security practices list. The other two are not to use end-of-life or unsupported software, and don't use known, fixed or default passwords.
So two password related ones and one about patching. I guess they're good advice, but it's not nearly enough, is it? That's crazy.
Something I've been looking at this week is some researchers at Cyber News have found a very popular router, domestic consumer use router. It's the TP-Link Archer C50 AC 1200, which is a long title for a small router, and it's a relatively cheap router, which probably accounts as to why it's an Amazon's choice and a bestseller. But what these researchers found is that it comes by default out of the box with a whole bunch of vulnerabilities that can be exploited in the firmware and also with the web management interface.
You know, if you're thinking about golden rules for staying cyber safe at home, you know, router security, home internet security, and it's right up, you know, number 1 or 2 on that list.
Yeah, I mean, the vulnerabilities involved here in this firmware for the router could be exploited to enable DDoS attacks, denial of service attacks, network attacks, privilege attacks, and also they can leak credentials, leak user credentials, including admin passwords. So these are quite serious things. And to be fair to TP-Link, when they were contacted, they have actually now responded. This is an old router, by the way. This is first released in 2017, but it's shipping with that original firmware. TP-Link are now saying that they're going to force a firmware update on all users, and they'll also send notifications out to through the management console.
Yeah.
Talking about routes into business, I think the other stark thing that hit social media has been just how much Apple is playing Google to sit on everybody's iPhones and govern their searching, right?
Absolutely. So the figures are stark. Bernstein analysts are estimating Google's payment to Apple is going to increase to 15 billion in 2021. That's going to go up to 18 billion and 20 billion in 2022. So it's absolutely crazy money. What a lot of people don't know is that Apple and Google, in fact, a lot of people do know, but a lot of people don't. Apple and Google used to be very good friends. When the iPhone launched, Google's Eric Schmidt was actually at the iPhone launch. He used to be on their board, and the two used to work really, really closely together. Apple and Google fell out over Android. There was further kind of dissatisfaction and anger over Google launching Chrome as well, because Google actually stole some of the Safari devs at the time. So, you know, this battle's been going on for years and years. And now we've got this privacy battle happening between the two as well. Not as obvious as the Apple and Facebook one, but there is an Apple and Google battle going on in the privacy space. In the background, we've got this search deal going on.
Well, this is a really interesting one, isn't it? And people have to see search and browsers are not the same. And if Apple was sitting on this call, they'd say, yeah, but Safari blocks trackers. You know, we work with DuckDuckGo, they audit the tracker list and all the rest of it. So whilst Google is doing the search and is generating revenues from just the SEO terms and the ads that it runs and everything else, what it's not doing is doing the cross-site tracking, which is, we've talked, last weekend we talked about Chrome and cross-site tracking, which is a real issue. You don't get that with Apple.
I love DuckDuckGo. I love some of the alternatives, but anybody who's ever used Bing will know what a wonderful experience that is. Google works, and Google is the best search engine there is. You know, and if Safari strips out the tracking through use of DuckDuckGo, then that's a win-win. I mean, it's certainly a win for Apple, isn't it? Because how much of their revenue does that money that Google paid them represent?
Yeah, I don't have it. I mean, yeah, I've rallied against Chrome, as everybody knows. I don't have a particular issue with Google search engine. It's what it is. If you go into a search engine and search for, some shiny new brown shoes, clearly it's an opportunity for people to try and sell you brown shoes. I don't have an issue with that. I think, we have to be sensible about and pragmatic about the advice we're giving. I do have an issue, as I said last week, I do have an issue where the search engine and the browser and the tracking protections and everything is coming from the same place. The whole poacher gamekeeper thing. I do think if you're running Safari and you choose to run Google search, okay. Talking of users, I guess, worth just acknowledging, we're always supremely grateful for the support SDC is getting. We've had our best month. I reckon 3 million views of our videos this month. So we are grateful, humbled by just the number of people that are watching our videos and the feedback and the emails and the messages that we're all getting.
Absolutely. And also very humbled, all three of us, very humbled that if I can just get my poor arms to work. We won an award as well for...
I got the trophy finally.
Yeah, they sent it to me because they thought that I'd die quickest. This is the European Cybersecurity Blogger Awards 2021, and SDC won the most educational content, which is brilliant because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to spread the word and educate as many people as possible about the importance of security and privacy.